Hello, my friends. A couple of years ago, I was hiking out here with my good friends Blake and Greg from Northwinds Wilderness School, and they showed me usnea. This is a lichen that grows on the trees around here. It likes places that have really good air quality. Some people know it as old man's beard, and I think there's a couple other species. It's found all over from the south and the northwest of the United States, here in the North Woods. At the time, they shared that it was a powerful medicinal, and I've been researching it since then, and it found that, as they told me, and as research is bearing out, it's a powerful antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal. A really interesting thing that they're finding about it recently is that it has the ability to break down biofilms. Biofilms are what makes, for instance, the lime spirochete so able to protect itself from antibiotics. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I'm sitting here on a mossy boulder, and I'm surrounded by plants, by trees, birch and maples and oaks, a whole host of plant beings all around me. And in fact, although I'm pretty adept at knowing this environment, as I start to look around, I can see that there's multiple species of mosses. There's some growing on trees, there's some growing on rocks. They have different growth patterns. There's lichens here that are strange and beautiful and that I don't know the names of. And many of the plants around me, I am only slightly familiar with their properties. And I'm a person that teaches wilderness skills. Why this is relevant is that we've crafted a culture, a society for ourselves that we are getting to see has maybe some delicate foundations. As I was thinking on this, I thought about how it is becoming qualitatively different as we become more technological. When we first started our basic getting into what we might call civilization, we still were fairly close to our roots. People hadn't forgotten the old ways, the folk traditions, knowing what plants could treat what illnesses. As we've progressed, we've become more and more dependent on our technology, to the point where many of us would not be able to survive because we're taking medicines, for instance, that we depend on just to make it to the next day. Mentally, emotionally, extremely dependent upon so many aspects of our world. I get to see this firsthand when forest monks come out, usually relatively healthy individuals. But the mental emotional part is tough. It's really tough. And to start thinking about gathering your own food at all, to start thinking about cooking your own food, some of these basic things that were common knowledge to our ancestors are becoming more and more forgotten, to the point where I can get by in life right now in our world without ever cooking, without ever having to deal with disposing of my own bodily waste, without ever having to treat my own illnesses or injuries, without even having to look at my mental emotional state, because I can constantly engage in distraction. Sometimes I think that unicorns and fairies, dragons, they're real. But we lived in a world where they were real, and then we started to branch away into a different way of seeing the world. And that world became hidden to us. Now that might seem far-fetched, but in the same way, this world of plants around us is becoming a world that we're turning away from and is becoming hidden from us. So that when most people come into a forest, they see what we sometimes call a wall of green. Everything looks the same. And to share with somebody how to identify one plant from another, this creates a very evident situation that shows that our brains don't see things anymore. They don't see the unicorn. We have to be trained to see that wild leek because it looks exactly like a trout lily to us. And it's not until we train ourselves to see what was already there that we start to enter that world again. A big part of divorcing ourselves from a world and entering into a new world is that we begin to fear the old world and to negate in our minds the positives about it. A prime example is that I will hear from people that they do not believe that plants could be medicinal and could heal anything. And on this same walkabout that they express disbelief that any of these plants could have healing capacity, they might be asked to eat something and they'll be afraid to eat an edible thing for fear that it's going to poison them. This is a disconnect in our mind because what we're failing to see, of course, is that we simultaneously are believing, holding a belief that a plant can be extremely bioactive and that plants cannot be bioactive. Here I'm saying, I believe that a plant could kill me, which means that it's going to have a profound effect upon my physical body. And yet saying, I don't believe that a plant could have another effect upon my body. It might be able to make my heart stop, but it can't help my body to reduce an infection that I have. This is where our mind, unexamined, will start to just accept a new world. In this case, this new world of technology. And many of you who watch here, I'm sure understand exactly what I'm talking about because you live closer to the earth. You eat plants that you grow or that you harvest from the wild. And you treat some of your ailments, if you have some, with herbs, with plants. But for many of us, and I would say probably all of us, this affects to some amount. I mean, it does affect me, I would say. There is an acceptance, in ways I don't even fully comprehend, of this technological world, and an immersion into it, a seduction, a hypnotism, that turns me away from remembrance of this other world. Now we're at a time, this moment that's always ripe with possibility for transformation and change, to say there's great things about this technological world, but I see how these worlds work in eclipsing each other, and they don't necessarily need to. I might still be able to have technology in my life, but remember this world and learn about this world and grow deeper and deeper immersed into this world. So it means being able to watch those YouTube videos, and there's many amazing people that are doing videos on plants and mushrooms, and to learn from them, from the technology, but to remember that we need to also go out here into this world in order to really have it grow inside of us. This is happening even in the technological world, where I was reading a research article on moss and how the moss has recently been discovered to have a polysaccharide in it that they believe could be very, very good for gut health. We're still researching that and trying to understand it, but here was an example of something that's just green. It's just this green stuff that grows on trees, it grows on rocks. It doesn't have a lot of meaning other than that. I might be able to do a little natural navigation with it, but it's not something vital to my being. And yet, I'm coming to find, as I explore my world more and I come to know more and more about nature, that every single one of these plants, everything in this world over here, has some significance for me, and often a really powerful significance. That significance could be that if I start adding some of this moss to my diet in a limited way, it's going to be really, really good for my gut health, which is going to be really good for my overall health. It could be mental, emotional. Here's a little story. We were in Hawaii, and we were living in our little space and trying to get out as much as we could to nature, but having a lot of trouble finding nature to go out into. And one day we decided we would go see a movie. And the girls wanted to see Frozen 2. We went to this movie, and it was in a theater. I don't think we've been, actually in their whole lives, to a movie in a theater, except for the first Frozen, which Mirabelle saw when she was really, really little. So it was their first experience in a movie theater. And we watched the movie, and in one scene, the characters go into a forest, and it was filled with aspen, and there was a rock that had lichen all over it. I almost started bawling my head off. I felt such a powerful longing come into me at the sight, even though it was animated, the sight of those trees, the sight of the lichen. And I knew there was another example of how the elements of this environment feed me much deeper than just as a food. They feed my soul, my spirit, my heart. This world over here teaches us, and is teaching us more and more, as the old ones knew, but also as science is coming in and saying, oh, look, this plant does this plant does this effect. That everything in this world was wrapped up in our existence. We were intertwined with this world once. So deeply intertwined that I think it's in all of our ancestral memories. And now we're entwining ourselves in this. When I sleep in a house, I'm breathing little microplastic particles and the chemicals that are in the plywood, and I'm literally becoming part of this environment. The more time I spend in this environment, the more right now I'm breathing in little particles up from the decayed oak leaves and tiny little insects and from the birch, and all of this is coming into me. I may eat it and bring it very directly into me, but just sitting here, what am I absorbing through my skin, through my breathing, through my visuals, through my emotional state of being in this environment, being out in nature? This is a call then to recognize how this has happened in human history. How we have lived in one world, and then the dominant forces in our culture shift and change and create a completely new paradigm. Those familiar with science will know that we went from a science that saw itself as very participatory to becoming more what I call mechanolinear, saying that humans aren't essentially a necessary or important part of the whole system. Now, some scientists who, granted, are on the edge of things are saying consciousness perhaps could play more of an important part in this experience of the universe than we think. But whatever the dominant thought is right now in our culture, that tends to have a profound influence on our minds, on our ideas, on our beliefs. But when we're in the know, when we know that this has changed throughout human history and it will change again, we'll look at this current scientific paradigm that we're in and we'll laugh at it as much as our future selves will laugh at it, as much as our current selves look back at some of the thoughts that the whole solar system revolved around the earth and might laugh at that. Wherever we are, we can be sure that our knowledge is incomplete, but recognizing that this incomplete system has the power to suck us in, and it will take our minds and shape them. To truly become free thinking, we need to understand how these worlds are generated within our experience. And then to see how they suck us in and to say, wait, I have a choice. I can immerse myself into other worlds. And when I do, I start to see things. It can be as simple as getting out into nature and starting to learn some of these plants, some of the bird songs, some of the sounds of wind. Some of the forest monks, by the time they left here, they could walk blindfolded through the woods and tell if they were under an oak tree or a maple tree or a red pine or a white pine, because the sound of the wind through all of those trees is different, has a different voice. We can't see that if we're completely wrapped in this world. Now I'm in trouble. But we can relearn it. And if we start relearning and we become really open-minded, how far could this go? What aspects of the world are there waiting? But we just can't see them because we have become trapped in that dominant worldview. Well, hopefully I didn't go too deep today, my friends, and you enjoyed this talk. But I would love to hear your thoughts upon it. Do you believe in fairies and dragons? Do you believe in medicinal plants? Do you believe in the current scientific paradigm? And whatever your belief is, are you willing to look outside of that? And have you done this before? And when you have, what did you find? Did you find that you were able to have the mental resilience to explore other things with truly open mind and heart? Or have you felt the power of that dominant culture and felt how it just will dismiss things, won't even look at things? I want to hear your experience, your thoughts on this. Again, going deep, but I know you all are deep. So loved you all. Can't wait to see what you have to say in the comments.